today's going to look a little bit different. We actually have 3 presenters who are going to be talking to you today. Just a quick reminder before I introduce our 3 speakers. All unapproved technology, remember, store that away. I know it's very tempting to check Instagram and fantasy updates, but save that for after. And then all of the conversations that you really want to have, save that so you can get credit for it in class next week. If you have questions, hopefully there will be some time at the end. If not, write them down, and I can give you the contact information for any of our presenters who would be happy to follow up with you after this presentation. But the 3 presenters that we have today are, we have Dr. Thomas Varacalli, who's Dean of the Honors College. We have Dr. Catherine Nolan, who's Assistant Professor and Chair of the Philosophy Department. Did I get that right? And we've got Coach Mike Lynch, who's head coach of our women's soccer program at the Abbey. And to get us started, I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. Varacalli, who's going to be talking about humility in the rule of St. Benedict.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you today. I think the best way to talk about humility is to start with a particular example of humility that I came across. So in August, during your first week on campus, Belmont Abbey hosted matriculation in the Basilica during Vespers. You were all there. And Father Elias was one of the cantors. He had a solo part. And I was struck while sitting in the faculty choir how beautifully he sang. So perhaps out of some pride, I approached Father Elias to compliment his singing. He responded, "Thank you, thanks be to God." Father Elias's response, "Thanks be to God," continues to strike me as a great example of humility. Humility is a virtue akin to moderation. Humility entails some recognition of man's talents, but within proper context. That context being that all the talents we have come and derive from God. Last week, during the pre-work part of our course, I wanted to emphasize to my particular section what humility is not. Sometimes I think people view humility as lying to oneself or denying that one has good attributes about them. And this view of humility is not true. Humility, by the way, is also not scrupulosity. Humility is a virtue. A virtue is a moral excellence. Virtuous people do not lie. If Dr. Nolan gives a person an A on a philosophy exam and tells you to your face, "Good work," we know it is not humble to say to Dr. Nolan, "That's right, you're very lucky to have me in your class." But it is also not humble to state, "No, this was bad work. I could have done so much better," even though you got a 98. If Coach Lynch compliments one of his players with a good hustle or good coverage, we know it is not humble to say, "Coach, I'm God's gift to this team." But it is also not humble to state, "No, Coach, I was horrible. I was lucky on that shot." When you weren't lucky, it was your genuine effort. For there is a danger of the philosophy student or the soccer player actually denying their talents out of pride. We know that humility is contrary to pride and to gloating, but sometimes the denial of our talents are also out of pride. And humility is one of those virtues that exists to flatten pride. If you are sitting in this room and you think you belittle yourself out of pride or spiritual scrupulosity, ask yourself why. And if you don't know how to handle such situations, follow with Father Elias's advice. Thank you, thanks be to God. Because such a response both recognizes the talent, but also affirms that such talents are gifts from God. Father Elias's answer affirms reality in the highest sense. Humility is a virtue. It is learned through habituation, and it takes a significant time to master, a lifetime, if we're perfectly honest. And one of the famous and short treatises on humility comes from St. Benedict himself. You read it last week for pre-work. It's chapter 7 of the Rule, which outlines 12 steps of humility. It is a strict set of rules. Reading it this morning, I was reminded how strict these rules are, befitting of monks, but also befitting all of us. In reading these steps, I think you will feel somewhat of a sense of discomfort, a good discomfort, because both God and St. Benedict are asking us for a radical transformation of life. Now, because of the limitations of time, I'm not going to go over all 12 steps. I myself haven't even mastered the first step, so of course I feel like an imposter up here. But I would like to talk about the first 4 or 5. 1, and make sure you write this down. Step number 1. Man should always have fear of God before his eyes. Again, man should always have fear of God before his eyes. Everyone, God is greater than anything we can possibly imagine. He's omnipotent, that means he's all-powerful. He's omniscient, that means he's all-knowing. And he's omnipresent. He's everywhere. He knows everything about you. Make sure to write that one down. There's one thing I want you to walk away with this. It's God knows everything about you. You can't hide. And the more we think of God and invite him into every aspect of our lives, we will be more at peace. And it is God, not our individual will, that provides the happiness we are looking for. In his commentary, Benedict makes a distinction between our individual will and God's will. Our individual will is inclined to all sorts of temptations and sins because we desire things that are contrary to God. Our desires are not pure. Just because we desire something doesn't make it good. In order to overcome these things, we need to orient our individual will to God's will. With God, we can overcome our temptations and sins. Humility requires relationship with God. We need to fear, as St. Benedict states, the pains of hell, which are very, very, very real. But we have to love God not simply for the pains of hell. We have to love God for his own sake. We have to love that which is perfect, who perfectly loves us. And in that love of God, we will develop that fetus of humility. Step number 2 for St. Benedict is man should not love his own will, but God's will. Make sure to write this down, right? Man should not love his own will, but God's will. There are a variety of things out of pride that we cling to. Our routine, our possessions, our friends, our dreams about the future. But we have to ask ourselves, is that what God truly wants for me? The humble person chooses what God wants for him, even if he does not initially find it attractive. But God is a just God. He doesn't bully us. He doesn't assign things that aren't befitting us. Omniscient, all-knowing in all things, God knows what is best for all of us, and we need to follow it. And the humble person bows his head before God and obeys God's will, even if it brings a certain amount of discomfort, at least initially. Number 3, man should subject himself to a religious superior. Number 3, man should subject himself to a religious superior. Now, I know this is obvious for monks, but may not be obvious to us. Nevertheless, we should strive in all things to have a spiritual director. Mentorship is very important For all of you who are athletes, think of how important your coach is. If you have a good coach, you can do amazing things. If you have a bad coach, there is a very low ceiling that you have. And the same goes with the spiritual life. We need someone experienced in, quote, the divine things, end quote, who can guide us to understanding and appreciate God's will better. Number 4, man should accept hard things, even injuries, with patience and even temper. Number 4, man should accept hard things and even injuries with patience and even temper. Following God's will is tough, as is documented in the book of Job or in the carrying of the cross. God does not shield people from injuries. The rain, as a very famous quote states, falls on the just and the unjust alike. There's a great mystery to that. But in order to truly trust God, one does need to be tested. What good is a soccer player if a soccer player never plays against another team? What good is a philosophy student if he does not withstand cross-examination from an interlocutor? So too in the religious life. We need to be tested. We need to test our spiritual muscles in order to strengthen them. And then number 5, the final one I'll talk about, is the confession of evil thoughts. Number 5 is the confession of evil thoughts. Humility, as I said, flattens pride. And the beauty of confession, particularly the Catholic sacrament of reconciliation, is that it is an opportunity to reveal our hearts and to not hold back from acknowledging and asking for forgiveness for our sins and our struggles. Because once we confess and ask for forgiveness, we further unite our will to God and continue to grow. The next several steps are hard ones, and if you read number 7 or 8, they may seem, but I don't think they do, they may seem to contradict what I had said in the beginning about not lying to oneself. But remember, everything that St. Benedict writes in chapter 7 is correct. And even if we don't completely understand number 7, which states that a man should believe himself to be the lowest or vilest of men, we have to remember that the more we learn, the more we know ourselves, we will simultaneously, one, how good we are because we're created by God, but we will also simultaneously see all the sins, all the vices that we have. Because the more we desire to perfect ourselves, the more we will see all those imperfections that get in the way of our perfection and with beatitude with God. So I want to thank you very much for listening to me. And next up is Dr. Catherine Nolan of the Philosophy Department.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Dr. Nolan from the Philosophy Department. You could probably guess that when I assigned Socrates as your reading. Most of you are probably familiar with Socrates already from high school, right? He's the person that was killed by the Athenians. He was forced to drink hemlock. He was forced to drink a poison. And usually it's presented as there was no real good reason for them to do this. And sometimes it's harder to remember why Socrates is so important. Like, why do we remember him and not the thousands of other people who were killed unjustly by governments since the beginning of history, as everybody likes to begin their papers. So here, I wanted to explore a little bit why Socrates is remembered, why he is so important. And I think a big part of that is because he understood his own limits. And his understanding of his own limits allowed him to learn more deeply about difficult concepts and ask questions that no one had asked before, questions that people are still examining today. In this reading, Socrates explores this himself. He tells us what makes him different from everyone else. So at one point, someone had asked the oracle at Delphi. So Delphi in Greece was where there was supposed to be some access to knowledge that was normally hidden from humans. You'd ask the Pythian prophetess, and she would get information from this oracle, and she would be able to tell you answers to things that nobody would normally know. So you'd ask for questions about your own fortune, or what to expect in the future, right? What to expect with weather or politics. And one person went up and asked a question about Socrates. Is Socrates the wisest person, or are there people wiser than Socrates? And the Pythian prophetess said, no, Socrates is the wisest of all. And Socrates was really puzzled by this. He says, he doesn't understand human and political virtue in the reading that we have here. But he's impressed by those who do understand this. So how can he possibly be the wisest person of all? And he ends up going around and talking to lots of different groups of people who claim to know the truth. And he ends up finding out that they actually don't understand all of these difficult concepts that they claim to understand. In fact, they're very confused. And he gets to them tied into knots in his discussions with them, right? He shows that they believe contradictory things. He shows that they can't actually claim to have this knowledge that they say they have, right? They don't have this knowledge. So he thinks now that he understands why the oracle called him the wisest. Socrates' wisdom is just knowing that he does not know, right? Knowing that you do not know is a better state to be in than thinking you know the answers but being completely wrong, right? If you know that you do not know, you can be open to learning. And that's what Socrates was, in a way that hardly anyone had presented before him, right? And that brings me to our topic of today, humility. Right? Another philosopher, 1,500 years later, St. Thomas Aquinas, said that humility restrains the appetite from aiming at great things against right reason. In other words, it's realizing what our limits are and being reasonable in our expectations of ourselves. And I'm going to talk specifically about how I see the virtue of humility lived out in the academic life, the life of schoolwork and classes and research and publishing. I think that humility can help us in 4 different ways here, and I'll go through each of these ways. First, it can open us to learning. Secondly, well, the last 3 I'm going to treat together. It can help us avoid what I'll call the 3 Ps: plagiarism, perfectionism, and panic. So, those are the 4 things. It can open us to learning, it can help us avoid plagiarism, avoid perfectionism, and avoid panic. So first of all, opening our minds to the truth. I think the most important way that humility helps in the academic world is by opening our minds to a reality that we don't yet know. So many people have opinions that they believe to be knowledge. I teach an ethics class, and it's really kind of fun to see the people come in. People have very deep convictions about ethics, what is right and what is wrong. But then when you start to ask them why they believe something is right or why they believe something is wrong, they haven't necessarily thought that through. And they come to realize what they have is just an opinion and not actual knowledge. It takes digging deeper and understanding why you believe something, examining the evidence honestly to really have knowledge. And so it's only by admitting to ourselves that we don't know, like Socrates, we don't know, we might not be correct, that we can set aside our opinions, set aside the things we always thought we knew, and open ourselves to truth, right? As a very personal example of this, I'm a Canadian, and for the longest time, like this wasn't even just a childhood belief, but I believed this into my teens. I thought that if a human was in conditions where the temperature was above the human body temperature, warmer than 98.6 degrees, I thought you would die. And then I moved down here, right? Obviously, that's not true. You don't die in temperatures of 98 degrees or higher. But being a Canadian, I'd never encountered that before, and so it just seemed like that would be a horrible situation and would probably kill you. But you have to let go of these beliefs, these opinions, these mistakes that we have, and realize what we don't know before we can move on to learning new things, right? Before we can really examine evidence. And this isn't just in one area. This isn't just for philosophy, for instance. It's in every area, right? Realizing that you don't necessarily know the best processes for solving math equations can lead you to learn new shortcuts and new techniques, right? You can get new insights into literature if you reread a book with an open mind. You don't think you learned everything about it when you first read it in high school. You can get new insights into human nature and psychology if you don't think that you already understand the way people work, if you open yourself up to new possibilities. You can propose new hypotheses in science if you don't think that you already know everything that is true, right? It can be scary to admit that you don't know, but it's a requirement for learning. Practicing the virtue of humility, knowing what our own limits are, the limits of our own knowledge, unlocks our potential for growth here. So that's the first thing that I think humility can help us do. It can open us to learning. Secondly, it can help us fight against plagiarism. So plagiarism, I'm sure all of you guys are familiar from high school and working here already for a semester, would be passing off work that you haven't done as your own work, right? And humility means recognizing what you've done yourself and where you've had help. In academia, so in your classes or in research that you do, this means citing your sources. It means showing when you're using someone else's work. This isn't wrong, right? It's not wrong to look at what someone else is saying and to say, I think they're right. I'm going to use them to support my argument or my paper. But we do need to show where we get evidence or where we get ideas from other people. It's an honest way of collaborating and putting ourselves in this long conversation that is academia, right? We've had people discussing these topics since Socrates, right? One way of putting this is there's a phrase, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? There are great people in the past who have come up with amazing theories and very interesting definitions for concepts, and we can learn from these great people who came before us. That doesn't mean that we can't add to their knowledge. We can, but we also need to confirm that we understand where we got that information from. Humility means knowing what we get from other people and what we're adding to that. It's a way of being responsible for giving credit where credit is due. So the third point, so you've got, it opens us to learning, it's against plagiarism. The third point, I think it's against perfectionism, right? It's something that helps us do our own work, and that means making our own mistakes. So sometimes fear of failure will stop us from working out something on our own, right? Instead, we might be tempted to use AI to create an article or a writing assignment that we think would be better than what we could do on our own. But the problem is, if we don't do that work on our own, we don't end up growing. We don't end up developing new skills. We don't end up challenging ourselves, right? We don't learn. And here again, I think we can go back to Socrates in the reading for a good example. He points out that they shouldn't expect him to be eloquent. If he's eloquent, it's only because he's telling the truth. He's not going to be persuasive. He's not going to be stylish in his speech, right? He says he's going to be using the words and arguments which occur to him at the moment. He's using his own style, the words that he uses when he's arguing with people in the marketplace, the agora. Right? He's not trying to match what he knows others will expect. He's doing his own work. He's making his own mistakes. And everyone starts as a beginner. Humility means we shouldn't feel embarrassed about that. We shouldn't feel worried about showing that. Even if we have great ambitions, we need to start out not doing perfect work, right? And that means being humble enough to recognize our own limits, being humble enough to realize that we will make mistakes, we will need correction, but doing it anyways, and growing as we go through that. Right, so we've got the first, it opens us to learning. The second, it stops us from plagiarizing. The third, it stops us from being perfectionists. We can recognize our own limits and start small. Fourth, I think it helps prevent panic. So I think a humble student is a student who would give themselves extra time. And I think this goes for other people as well. As a professor, I think as a humble professor, I need to give myself extra time to do the things that I need to get done. It's so easy to assume that what we want to do is going to take less time than we need, right? It's so easy to think that we can get things done faster than we actually can. And so we should, in humility, plan for reading to take longer than we expect. We should start writing assignments earlier than we think we need to. We should slow down so that we remember the things that we're trying to learn. Humility means being realistic about difficulty. And it's really easy to overestimate what we can get done. This isn't just helpful to prevent burnout. I think it absolutely is, right? It's so easy to burn yourself out if you aren't humble and if you think unreasonably that you can achieve so many more things than you actually can, right? It's not just helpful to prevent burnout, though, but it's another thing that I think can help keep us academically honest. I have seen so many more plagiarized papers from students who are panicking because they have no time than I've seen from students who are lazy, right? It's very easy to get yourself into a situation where you're desperate and you don't have the ability to finish your assignments if you're not humble, right? Humility helps us set aside what we need to complete tasks and not overemphasize our abilities to the point where we can't get done what we want to get done, right? So ultimately, what I've hoped to show all of you, I've hoped to share this with all of you, is that humility in academics allows us to learn. It's an antidote to plagiarism, perfectionism, and panic. It allows us to walk away from our false opinions, to give credit to the people who have come before us and those who have taught us. It allows us to make our own mistakes, and it allows us to take the extra time that we need to work through things. So I would argue that humility is an excellent virtue for every student to espouse. I think it's something that will help you in so many different areas of your life at Belmont Abbey College. Thank you very much.
I don't know about you all, but I could take both of them into my locker room and our performance would improve next week. There's so many great tips to the sporting environment. I want to open with this. Just this idea of being open to learning, this idea of the fear of God as the beginning of wisdom, one of the 12 steps in the rule as far as humility. And that is, again, we have to, and we find this in athletics especially, in order to be able to improve performance, but are we open, are we curious? And so, for example, give me the okay sign. Everybody go like this. Okay, go ahead and stick it on your chin. How many of you have it on your cheek? Okay, some of you, half of you. So what that tells us is that that's just one idea of trying to find out real quickly if you're a visual learner, auditory learner, or you're a kinesthetic learner. But usually, most people are visual. That's going to be their default. It kept us alive through evolution. You know, the saber-toothed tiger over there, if I saw that movement, it kept me alive. So we have very much visual cues. not as much auditory. So you have to really listen because it's something that doesn't come naturally to us. So as part of wisdom, if I really think that something is of value, then I'm going to have to really listen. And so it's kind of like, it's like anything, it's hard work. And but if you have an attitude of curiosity, an attitude of learning, an attitude of I don't know everything right now, then all of a sudden I'll dial in. And yet we know it's hard to listen for more than 30 seconds. That's why the Super Bowl has commercials at 30 seconds instead of a minute and a half, because they lost you. Right now I've already lost half of the group, so I'll dial it back in. I'll try another little activity. Go ahead and cross your arms. So like this. Just go ahead and cross your arms. Like the way you normally do. Everybody feel good? There's your whole body language talk we could do about that as far as what this means, but this feels comfortable? Okay, now crossing the other way. Raise your hand if that feels very uncomfortable. Anybody? Okay, so why is that? We're still crossing our arms. Okay, so again, kinesthetically, we find out that something that is new or different is going to feel not as comfortable. And we know that we have to get uncomfortable in order to learn. And so I have to be curious. I have to get willing. I got to get beyond the uncomfortableness in order to be able to be open to what the learning is. And so I'm curious. I'm doing these things. And in athletics, and Dr. Nolan had talked about these the openness to learning, and then the 3 Ps. Okay, that second one on perfectionism. We're trying to learn a new skill, and yet we know that in order to learn a new skill, I have to drop in performance first. Why is that? It's because I'm trying something new that's uncomfortable. I already have my comfortable things. I'm good at that. Now I got to get better. In order to get better, I have to try something new, which causes me to be uncomfortable, which means my performance drops until I get comfortable. And then now I'm at a new level because I can do my old performance plus the new skill that I'm working on. But it's that openness, it's that curiosity is what leads to next level performance. And most people don't do that. When Tiger Woods was winning all the golf tournaments, he's the best golfer in the world at that time. He says, but I'm not getting better, so let me try some new things. And he then got a new golf coach, gave him a new swing, because he knew that his swing, if he wanted to get better, he's going to have to do a different swing. And so his performance dropped until that became comfortable with the new technique, and then he returned to the very top level of golf again. So it's just one of those phenomenons. And I wanted to, if you can go to that next slide there, Nathan, and this is what, again, whether you're in athletics or in business or in academia, it doesn't matter. It's still about how much do we know, how much are we helping, how much are we becoming. So if you look at that first question, are you focused on proving yourself to another, or are you focused on becoming your best self? I would argue that if you're trying to prove yourself, pride slips in, arrogance sometimes slips in. We're going to have a fight on the basketball court now because you challenged me. Versus, am I focused on becoming my best self? If I'm focused on becoming my best self, that means I'm being a great teammate. How do I help my team win? I've got to stay in the game. We got to keep our composure, all those kinds of things. So our beliefs are really going to drive our actions, and we know that our beliefs drive our actions drive our results give us a new experience, which forms our beliefs. So our beliefs are so important, and that's why this fundamental Benedictine hallmark of humility is the beginning of growth. Because as soon as we humble ourselves that we don't know everything, that allows everything else to occur after that. I want to show you a quick video, and some of you may be familiar with Ted Lasso. Some may not. Hopefully you'll enjoy this, but watch it. I want you to really pay attention to what's going on visually. Watch the body language, everything. But listen, really listen, and see and be looking for areas of humility or non-humility or openness to growth and those kinds of things. Go ahead, Nathan.
Mate, what do I need to win?
2 triple 20s and a bullseye.
Good luck. You know, Rupert, guys have underestimated me my entire life. And for years, I never understood why. It used to really bother me. But then one day, I was driving my little boy to school, and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It was painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I like that. So I get back in my car, and I'm driving to work, and all of a sudden, it hits me. All them fellas that used to belittle me, not a single one of them were curious. You know, they thought they had everything all figured out, and so they judged everything, and they judged everyone. And I realized that they're underestimating me. Who I was had nothing to do with it. Because if they were curious, they would ask questions, you know? Questions like, have you played a lot of darts, Ted? Which I would have answered, yes, sir. Every Sunday afternoon at a sports bar with my father from age 10 until I was 16 when he passed away. Barbecue sauce. Good game, Ruben.
Come on, let's go.
You are very lucky. Continue.
So again, in that video, you have somebody who is not curious, somebody who is thinking that they're in command of the situation, they're in control of everything, and so makes a wager that basically then gets beat. And the person he's going again, Coach Lasso there, is thinking, you know, he still has to execute the darts and follow through on all that training that he's done all this time, but he's like, you know, people underestimate me because they weren't curious. They never found out that I was throwing darts my whole life. So if you can go to that next one, Nathan, that'd be great. So in the sports world, and I would again, I come from, Nathan, can you slide to one more? In the sports world, on that left side, before the game, during the game, after the game, before the sale, during the sale, after the sale, before I write my project, while I'm writing my project, after I write my project, or whatever it is, they all transfer. They all transfer. I was a military officer. I was a Fortune 50 sales executive and a college soccer coach. The skills that I was able to learn in each of those, and I'm still learning, is what transferred in and complemented in each position that I was taking. And if you look on that right side, Joe Ehrman, Inside Out Coaching, is one of the books among especially faith-based coaches, but we're constantly asking ourselves, why do I coach? Why do I coach the way I do? How does it feel to be coached by me? How do I define success? The answers to those 4 questions are critical to the experience of the players in my team and what the quality of the experience, how much they learn, how much they perform, how much they love each other. And so, but I would argue you could put yourself in there too. How do I compete? How do I play? How do I play the way I do? How does it feel to be a teammate with me? How do I define success? And again, whether it's on the field or it's in the classroom or it's in the business world as an employee, those items are still going to be there. And you'll see where it says before the game, if we, and again, the saying is fear no one, respect everyone. The first time I don't respect an opponent, we're going to get beat, unless we're lucky. And I don't like to rely on luck. Okay, so we have to do our work. And if that team appears to be the worst team in the league, that's the one that makes me the most nervous, because I'm fearful that now we're not going to be ready. And there's a saying I learned from Rick Neuheisel when he was at University of Colorado football, and that was, whenever you allow a team to go from can we to we can, you're in trouble. And that's what happens when you underestimate somebody because you're not curious, you're not respectful, you're not fearful. So during the game, together everyone achieves more, an acronym for team. We know that everybody has a role, and if everybody does their role, it should all come together. That doesn't mean we're going to win. It just means that it should all come together and we put ourselves in position to be successful. And again, that humility is what drives that. Without humility, we're never going to be together. Everyone achieves more. And then after the game, and this is absolutely imperative for us, is we're always going to be humble in victory and gracious in defeat. If we are not, we're probably going to get beat next time. Okay, because if we're not humble, then we probably think that we can just show up and the team's going to roll over for us and allow us to score goals. And we just know that's not going to be true. If I'm not gracious in defeat, then I'm not going to learn the lessons from that game that is going to allow me to be competitive and successful next time. In fact, sometimes our best performances we lost. And I know that if we keep doing that, we're going to be successful. It's just going to, we just got to keep plugging away. And so humility and victory, graciousness and defeat, again, this attitude of I can constantly get better. I can constantly become versus I've view myself as having arrived. I'll just mention just real quickly the reading I gave you that talked about Pope John Paul in one of his homilies. And Blessed St. Paul, John Paul, where he talks about may every athlete, person, strive to attain through self-mastery those basic human virtues that constitute a balanced personality, and that likewise develop a grateful and humble attitude towards the giver of every good, and thus of physical health as well, in this way opening up the soul to the horizons of the faith. When practiced with wisdom and balance, sport or competitive play or our work world, whatever, acquires an ethical and formative value and is a valid school of virtue for life. And so I just want to close today with, again, this idea that whatever role that we are taking, and you'll have some of this, I think, in your follow-on session next week, and that is, think about all your roles that you play right now. Right now, you are a son or daughter, okay? You are also maybe a sibling or a cousin, okay? You could be an aunt and uncle, some of you, that'd be exciting. You also have a role of, I'm a student. You also have a role of possibly I'm a student athlete, or I'm in the theater, or I'm involved in one of the leadership programs. That role is going to be out there. I'm also, and then most importantly, I'm going to have the role of I'm a child of God. But each one of those roles starts with a humble attitude. And if we can always check ourselves, check our attitude, we can always check ourselves and make sure that humility is the beginning of wisdom, then we put ourselves in a position to be successful in whatever roles we're doing. So again, I applaud you for paying attention. I applaud you again, the excellent presentations by Dr. Varacalli and Dr. Nolan on, again, the great thinkers and certainly the rule. And then hopefully, again, a little bit of just what sports, it's just around so much, whether we compete or whether we're just working out or whether it's professional, whether it's amateur. In order to be successful, we have to start with a humble attitude. So anything else you guys wanted to add? No, we're good. Thank you again for everybody's attention, and we'll see you around campus.